Breaking tonight, with just over 2 weeks until President-elect Donald Trump is sworn in, and before he takes a single official act as president, Democrats are mobilizing to block, delay, and obstruct his agenda. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Today, we witnessed the start of a new era in American government, the 115th Congress convening for the first time. And after Mr. Trump's inauguration 17 days from today, Republicans will control the White House and Congress for the first time since 2007. For their part, Democrats are trying to ensure that this new unified government gets off to a slow start. As that party's Senate leadership reportedly now planning on holding up the confirmation process for at least eight top major cabinet posts. Their goal, to drag out a process that normally takes weeks into months, a move that the Washington Post calls unprecedented. Newly minted Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer taking to the Senate floor today, offering this warning to the president-elect. Watch.
There are those who suggest that our baseline posture should be to work with the president-elect and have him pass his whole agenda. But, Mr. President, it is not our job to be a rubber stamp. It's our job to do what's best for the American people. The president-elect ran as a change agent. He ran against the establishments of both parties. Since the election, he seems to have forgotten that. Too many of his cabinet picks support the same hard-right, doctrinaire positions that many in the Republican Party have held for years. Policies that the American people have repeatedly rejected. If he attempts to adopt their time-worn policies, which benefit the elites, the special interests, corporate America, not the working man and woman, his presidency will not succeed.
In moments, we will be joined by former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who's a close advisor to the president-elect. But first, we go to Fox News politics editor Chris Steyerwalt on this coordinated effort against the new Trump administration. Chris, good to see you. So, I guess it's a war room. They're going to sit, they're going to have little combat helmets on, and they're going to decide how to take down these nominees, these cabinet nominees. So who do you think is most vulnerable? And are you shocked that they don't want Trump's guys?
Well, they got to do something. They got kicked in the shorts. They had their worst year in a lot of ways since 1988. They were not at all prepared for it. You can't have a war room if you don't have an army. They ain't got no army, and you got to do something. Schumer's using a little Trumpism here. He's making maximalist threats. He is saber rattling in hopes, I assume, that he can get something better down the road, get some leverage out of this deal. The two weak spots, you ask who's most vulnerable, I would say probably the two weak spots. One is Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who Trump has tapped to be the head of the EPA. Climate change stuff is going to be a big deal there. They'll hone in on him. They'll go hard right there. The other one, depending on what Trump does with the intelligence about the Russian hacking, could be Rex Tillerson, his pick for Secretary of State. That's a big target. That's a real big target. If they go after him and they get crossways about the Russians, that is a potential big liability, but we don't know how Trump's going to play the intelligence stuff yet.
But you heard Chuck Schumer. I'm not there. We're not there to be a rubber stamp. You know, we've got to put these nominees to the test and, you know, sort of trying to shore up, I don't know, what he considers to be an army. Is he the general? You say you can't, like, is there an army? Is he who's their leader?
Well, and that's exactly the issue. And Barack Obama says he's not leaving. He says he's got to continue to fulfill his role instead of doing what his predecessors have done, which is go and get obscenely rich quietly. He seems
that's the American way.
That's the American way, is that he seems to want to hang out, and he's going to continue to live in Washington, and he is going to be here, and says he wants to take a leadership role with Democrats. They're divided. They don't know which way to go. There's a lot of things that Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump, who are friends, agree on, like borrowing $1 trillion and spending it on infrastructure. They both want to do that. There are things that Democrats want to work with Trump on, but they're afraid that if they are seen as too accommodationist, they will lose their party's base and they will become even more hopelessly divided.
Did you get a haircut?
I did.
You look good.
I had all that time over Christmas. I had to do something.
You look kind of dapper, especially dapper tonight, Steyerwalt. Good to see you.
Happy New Year, Counselor.
To you too. Well, in addition to reports of obstructionism in the Senate. We are also learning tonight that the Democratic National Committee is building a, quote, war room filled with former staffers from Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign to challenge the new administration every step of the way. Joining me now, Newt Gingrich, a former Republican Speaker of the House and a close advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, and the author of the book, Treason. Great to see you, Mr. Speaker. So, you know,
you say that differently every time I'm on. It's amazing how many variations you have.
I want to read it. All right, so this is, I mean, what about the lecture we got when Barack Obama took office that we're supposed to root for our president and work together, and the shock and awe that was expressed when Mitch McConnell was saying, you know, their top goal was to defeat his agenda, and they, you know, what are you talking about? It's America. It's a different message now.
Well, look, I think the Democrats are in a state of shock. I'm old enough that I couldn't help but think of Charlie Halleck, who used to be the Republican House Minority Leader when John F. Kennedy was president and Lyndon Johnson was president. And Halleck sounded a lot like Schumer, although he was from Indiana, so the accent was different. But this no, 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 stop, 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 obstruct, obstruct, nothing shrinks your party faster than learning the word no. All of your allies love it. They all come and give you money at the fundraiser. They all applaud. But the rest of the country looks at you like you're nuts. You know, a couple of things were mentioned, I think, by either you or Greg, that are really amazing. If you think about it, by Steiwell rather, if you think about it, taking on Tillerson, who had the largest manufacturing company of its kind, but number 6 in the world of all companies, ExxonMobil, deals in 80 countries or so, stunningly successful, Eagle Scout, etc. Why would you want to pick a fight with him? I mean, I understand picking a fight with the Attorney General of Oklahoma. You almost have to for the Sierra Club. But I think the Democrats are just floundering right now. They know that they have to appear to their base to be saying no, but that is going to drive moderate and middle-class America away from them at a very rapid pace.
Now, what about you? You reportedly, when you were Speaker, you know, liked this kind of thing too. And there's a 2012 book by Draper, Do Not Ask What Good We Do, that suggested that that years ago you sat down and said, this is let me see. This is a strategy to take back the House back in 2010, so you weren't Speaker, and the Senate in 2012, and you said at the end of a meal, you will remember this day, you'll remember this day as the seeds of 2012 were sown, and that you know, like most Republicans, wanted obstructionism when there was a Democrat in the White House.
Well, what I said was, if Barack Obama governed based on his inaugural address and on his speech at Grant Park and on his speech the Saturday before the election, that he was so moderate, he was so much in the center of the country. If he governed like that, he'd be Eisenhower. He'd split the Republican Party, he'd be reelected, he would grow the Democratic Party, and we couldn't do anything about it. But if he went to the left, if he followed Pelosi and Reid and did exactly what they did do, he would set up a moment for real polarization. And that's what they decided to do. And that set the stage for 2010 and beyond. And my advice to Trump is to learn a really deep lesson from that. I mean, he has a chance to reach out to Democrats, and one of the things that Steiwell mentioned that's very real is the notion of a bill for infrastructure. He should be able to get at least a third of the Democrats to decide that they want an infrastructure bill.
But what about this cabinet? Like President-elect Donald Trump definitely has some agenda items that are, you know, in the middle ideologically that should be appealing to some of these Democrats. But the cabinet picks are clearly conservative, which is his right. Sure. He won. But they seem to be really digging in. And do you think that somebody like, some have also said, you know, Mnuchin, they're going to dig in on because he was behind, his group was behind a lot of these foreclosures on these, you know, these mortgage-backed securities. And do you think Scott Pruitt, who we just discussed for EPA, I mean, they're really going after Pruitt. Do you think they'll stop these guys from getting through? And how much capital does that expend when the Supreme Court justice fights come up?
Look, well, I think, first of all, the Democrats are going to be under enormous pressure. There's a spring session of the court. We already know that Trump is going to name one of the people on his list that he released months and months ago. They're all solid conservatives, but they're all widely respected jurists. I mean, nobody has suggested any of these aren't valid as Supreme Court nominees. So they'll bring that out very early, and the clock will start running, and the country's going to watch the Democrats twist themselves into pretzels. But let's take your deeper point, and I do think some of these guys have got to sort of earn their approval by doing really well in hearings and going to see senators and doing all the things you do in this process. But remember, he's not a normal Republican versus Democrat, right versus left guy. The example I tweeted about today is, jobs in Michigan by the Ford Motor Company, which is now going to invest $700 million in Michigan instead of Mexico. And the president of Ford said, look, we're doing this because we believe in the regulatory and tax reform that President-elect Trump is talking about. Now, what I tweeted today is, so how many Democrats in Michigan care enough about Michigan jobs to vote for the reforms that Ford says are essential to keep those jobs in Michigan? And that's going to this is going to be very different than anybody expects. This will not be a normal right versus left presidency. This will be a very innovative, very pragmatic presidency.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. Good to see you.
Happy New Year.
Well, as the former speaker just mentioned, there is new reaction tonight to President-elect Trump calling out General Motors. Trump's critics are now, and now GM itself, are hitting back. Anthony Scaramucci and Julie Roginski are here next to debate. And as Chicago's former top cop suggests the Black Lives Matter movement has led to an uptick in crime, we'll take a look at some suggestions of federal intervention in cities like Chicago under a Trump administration. What's going to happen to all these DOJ investigations? Plus, after sound issues resulted in a breaking tonight, President-elect Donald Trump employing a unique tactic during his transition, a penchant for calling out big business practices he objects to over Twitter, and in some cases getting results. But tonight, one of those companies is pushing back, with General Motors correcting the president-elect's claim of automobiles built overseas. Anthony Scaramucci and Julie Roginski are here on whether Mr. Trump's continued Twitter critiques may be bad for business. But first we go to Peter Doocy, live at Trump Tower, with the latest on today's fight with the auto giant. Peter, what's the story?
Megyn, he did it with Carrier, he did it with Boeing, he did it with Lockheed Martin, so now the president-elect is trying his luck with GM, now using Twitter to put pressure on the car maker to try and fall in line with his policies. He did tweet this morning. General Motors is sending Mexican-made model of Chevy Cruze to U.S. car dealers tax-free across border. Make in USA or pay big border tax. Mr. Trump has previously threatened a 35% tax for American companies he thinks are trying to make money here with products produced cheaply elsewhere, but it's rare for him to use this much detail, and GM quickly recognized they may have a problem on their hands. So they put out a defensive statement that explains, quote, all Chevrolet Cruze sedans sold in the U.S. are built in GM's assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio. GM builds the Chevrolet Cruze hatchback for global markets in Mexico, with a small number sold in the U.S. Well, Ford has been there, where GM is right now, before. Candidate Trump used to go after Ford hard on the trail for planning to move some production down to Mexico. But now that their critic is president-elect, the company has an announcement. They're pulling the plug on a factory project in Mexico and investing $700 million in a Michigan plant, something happening in part because of something the president-elect said.
When we look at some of the tax and regulatory reforms that he's been talking about, that gives us a lot of confidence, and this is a vote of confidence that he can deliver on those things.
And he's not just tweeting. The president-elect is ready to take questions. A long-awaited general news conference was announced tonight for January 11th. That is 1 week from tomorrow. Megyn?
Peter Doocy, thank you. Joining me now with more, Executive Committee member of the Presidential Transition Team, Anthony Scaramucci, and Fox News contributor and Democratic analyst Julie Roginski. Good to see you both.
Great to see you.
Thanks. So what's the problem? You know, Trump's defenders, President-elect Trump's defenders will say, so he's using the power of his office to try to obtain results for the American people.
Well, they're right that he is using the power of his office. I remember back in the day, Anthony, you might remember this too, when Republicans didn't like to pick winners and losers. They like to have the market play.
Are you talking about Solyndra?
I'm talking about, exactly. You guys complain about Solyndra quite a bit, and I'm happy to see that you're following suit by picking winners and losers through Twitter. Look, if he's able to accomplish this,
that's not what he's doing.
If he's actually able to accomplish this through regulatory reform and broad-based reform, that's one thing. If he's picking companies, naming them by name, where he's saying, if you do X, I will do Y, as he did for Carrier, for example, where Carrier got a few $1 million to save a couple hundred jobs, 800 jobs, that they will now use the money to automate most of those jobs anyway, but that's something the president-elect doesn't want to talk about. That's different. That's picking winners and losers, and that's something that I think people, Republicans at least, who love the free market, don't necessarily support or have it until they got into the cult of Trump.
So Julie's a tough verbal adversary, but what she's missing about the president-elect, he's become the blue-collar advocate in chief among so many other things that he's doing right now.
But how is that different from being the green advocate in chief that Barack Obama was?
It's very different because in the case of General Motors or Ford, they're existing companies. They have an existing capital allocation structure, and they're making a decision whether to produce here in the United States or produce off the shore of the United States. In Solyndra, it was a speculative deal where the President Obama was making a decision about the environment. In this case, it's the focus is on American workers, Megyn, and rising middle-class wages and working-class wages, and so it's a very, very big difference.
So it's the priorities you have an issue with. It's not the philosophy. It's the priorities.
It's actually not just the priorities. What the Democrats also understand, which we both understand, is that we've got to get the middle-class people rising wages. We've got to get the working class, which are turning into the working poor in the United States, into the aspirational zone like my parents
about that?
were.
What about the argument, Julie, that all he needs to do is pick a couple of these, right, and threaten? And that, the belief by some that the other companies who are thinking about moving their plants to Mexico will then be shamed out of doing it. They know he's going to come after them. They don't want that. And they're going to say, you know what? Is it really worth it?
I'm old enough to remember 2008. Barack Obama was riding high when he was coming into office. Everybody thought, it was a kumbaya moment. And then reality hits. And what ends up happening is these companies are going along now because he's not yet president. They're not sure what he's going to do. The minute his numbers start to tank a little bit, and inevitably, they will, because nothing's going to last forever, they're going to do what's best for their bottom line. And at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening is that they're going to make business decisions based on partially the regulatory environment, partially the tax environment, but also partially what's best for their bottom line.
If he really puts a 35% tariff
he's not going to do that.
He's not, because he has said that.
Well, I think that's a bargaining chip on the table to get the understanding among whether it's Mexico, other countries like China.
If he puts a 35% tax on those products coming across the Mexican border in the United States,
I understand that. Well, what the
American people are going to have to pay. They pay that price.
But Megyn, what the American people have to know, since 1945, we made, State Department and Treasury, a concerted effort to uneven the trade deals. Goods and services flow freely into the United States. Our goods and services are embargoed into other countries.
That is a fact.
Okay, Megyn, we did that to create economic interdependence. It was a bipartisan thing, both Democrats and Republicans. All Mr. Trump is now saying is time out. It's had the deleterious side effect of hurting working class families.
Deletery. Look at you.
Like that was a good
Delete
SAT
with
word.
ORY at the end.
ACTs for the young people out there,
Yes,
SAT for the old people. But can I tell you something?
What are you looking at me for? What's the pointing at me for and the old people?
No. I was pointing at that camera.
What was that?
I was pointing at that cameraman on stage 13.
Don't be mean at
Had
James.
nothing to do with you.
I'm not trashing poor James. The
Sorry, brother.
But your point is, he's like, enough is enough. It's done the good it needed to do. Let's even the playing field.
And let's even the playing field, because let me tell you something. The last best hope for globalism is Donald J. Trump. I'm going to tell you why. You create a burgeoning market for the middle class and the working class families. We're 23.6% of the GDP of the world. And we will see a increase.
It's similar to what he's doing with China.
Demand.
I mean, this is not that far afield from what he's doing with China, where he also sees an
imbalance. He loves the China. Great.
He loves the Chinese.
I can't wait to pay more for my iPod. Thanks.
Great to see you.
Julie's worried. She's worried.
I'm not worried. I hope you're right.
Okay, coming up. A not-so-subtle message from the president-elect to President Obama's former chief of staff after Mr. Trump suggests that Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel may need the feds to help tackle historic levels of violence in his city. And wait till you hear Rahm's response. We'll debate what it all might mean for the future of U.S. policing. Plus, the debate over Gitmo detainees still continues 8 years after President Obama promised to empty the prison as the very first thing he wanted to do upon becoming president. We'll show you how the president-elect just inserted himself into this debate earlier today, when former Congressman Pete Hoekstra and Matt Bennett join us right after this break.
This morning I watched President Obama talking about Gitmo, right? Guantanamo Bay, which by the way, we are keeping open.
Breaking tonight, the Obama administration and President-elect Donald Trump at odds over the controversial detention center at Guantanamo Bay. For more than 8 years, the president has vowed to close this facility. And with just 17 days remaining in office, the White House is suggesting that Barack Obama's Gitmo legacy could still be evolving. For more on that, we go to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, live in Washington. Catherine?
Megyn, though he's still more than 2 weeks away from taking office, today Mr. Trump inserted himself into the controversial detention of alleged terrorists at Guantanamo Bay. Writing in a tweet, "There shall be no further releases from Gitmo. These are extremely dangerous people and should not be allowed back onto the battlefield." Fox News has visited the detention camps more than any other TV network, and today only 49 detainees remain. And the Obama administration still plans to transfer as many as 19 men to other countries before the inauguration. The White House spokesman said today their policy remains on track, and Mr. Trump can do what he wants when he's in charge.
He'll have an opportunity to implement the policy that he believes is most effective when he takes office on January 20th.
The Obama administration's decision to transfer this detainee, Ibrahim al-Kozi, remains controversial and underscores the risk. After leaving the Gitmo camps in 2012, al-Kozi became the public face of al-Qaeda's most dangerous affiliate that was behind the attempted bombing of a U.S. passenger jet. The 5 9/11 suspects, including the self-described architect of the attack, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, are still held at Gitmo and already in the military legal system, so they're not eligible for transfer. But the case has essentially stalled out over the men's CIA detention and interrogation that critics call torture. One of his first acts as president in 2009 was the signing of an executive order to close the Gitmo camps within a year. That effort failed, with President Obama and his team now blaming Congress for throwing up roadblocks. Megyn?
Catherine, thanks.
You're welcome.
Joining me now with more, Pete Hoekstra, former Michigan congressman and advisor to President-elect Trump's transition team, and Matt Bennett, former deputy assistant to President Clinton. Great to see you both. So,
nice to be here.
Pete, let me ask you, because, you know, Barack Obama has made clear he wants to get rid of these last detainees, or at least 19 of them. So the White House was asked today, are you going to take into account President-elect Trump's request that he not transfer anymore, that a new administration's coming in, and that, you know, Donald Trump made an issue out of this on the campaign trail, saying that there's not going to be any more transfers and we're not going to close it. And the White House said, we will not be taking that into account. Your thoughts?
I think that's exactly right. President Obama is going to try to fulfill his first promise, one of his first promises that he made when he came into office. He's going to be unable to do it. And the end result is, with these 19 people that he most likely will transfer out by January 20, many of these are going to be the exact same people that Donald Trump is going to have to go back in his administration, that they're going to have to capture. We are in a hot war. The threat from radical jihadism today is as great as any time since 9/11. ISIS is taking credit for about 1,100 suicide attacks in 2016. You've got the attacks going on in Turkey and Germany and France and those types of things. You've got failed states in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. The threat is real. We are in a worse situation than we were in 2009 when this president came into office. We should not be letting these people free.
Well, what about it, Matt? Should President Obama give any thought to the desires of the incoming commander-in-chief on these 19 detainees?
No, he should not. We have one president at a time. President Obama will be president until noon on January 20th, and he has to act like it. If we somehow decided that between November and January we were going to have two presidents, or that the incumbent president was going to do nothing for 3 months, that would be a signal to the world that they could do whatever they liked for those 3 months and nothing would happen. That Obama has to act like the president. And Gitmo has been a superating sore in the war on terror from the beginning. You don't have to take my word for it. That's what Colin Powell says. That's what John McCain says.
But we've just had this election in which Donald Trump made this an issue. I mean, he said, we are keeping it open. We're going to load it up with some bad dudes. Believe me, we're going to load it up. So this was at play and an open issue in the 2016 presidential election, and the American public sided with Donald Trump.
Well, they voted for Donald Trump to be president. You can't say they sided with him on every single issue that he talked about. In fact, on many, if you look at the polling, they don't agree.
I'm taking this from Barack Obama, who, when he was running, whenever he got when he got elected and tried to put anything into play, he'd say, I disclosed this. I disclosed this when I was running around. I made this an issue. So I don't know. You tell me, Congressman Hoekstra, whether turnabout is fair play and he should be held to that same account, that the will of the American people has apparently shifted now, if you follow his logic.
Well, the turnabout should be fair play number one, because Donald Trump did win on these issues, but turnaround should be fair play, because bottom line is the policies of President Obama in fighting radical jihadism have failed. This president gave the radical jihadists just about everything from a perception standpoint they could have asked for. He engaged with the Muslim Brotherhood. He recognized
he gave Osama bin Laden a bullet between the eyes.
He gave Osama bin Laden a bullet, but when it came to long term, he embraced the Muslim Brotherhood. He supported their efforts to change the governments in Egypt and Libya and fostered the kind of chaos that we see today. The policy, Trump's policy, and his words should be listened to, because they set us on a new direction that enable us to hopefully defeat radical jihadists. They're not going. You're right. They're not going to be.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And it's always a hassle to transfer these guys, and nobody really wants them. And then we get like a promise from Yemen that they're going to watch them really closely. Great to see you guys.
Yes, hey,
good to be here, Megyn. Thanks.
Also tonight, after a year that saw nearly 800 homicides in Chicago, Mr. Trump hinting we could see big changes when it comes to policing in America, as the president-elect suggests that Mayor Rahm Emanuel of Chicago might need federal help now to tackle the historic violence in his city. And wait till you hear what Rombo, as Hannity calls him, has to say about that. He calls him Rombo Dead Fish Emanuel. He's not a fan, is the point. We're going to debate all of this with Kevin Jackson and Eric Guster just ahead. Plus, could there be legal, yes, I say legal fallout to Mariah Carey's now infamous... Developing tonight, controversy after President-elect Donald Trump opens up the new year with a tweet about one of the most violent years ever in the city of Chicago, and that sadly is saying something. Without mentioning him by name, Mr. Trump suggesting that if the Chicago mayor, Rahm Emanuel, can't get things under control, he should ask the feds to step in. Some are taking that as a sign that U.S. policing could undergo some major changes in 2017. Normally it's a local matter, not a federal matter. Amid some feelings that the timing could not be better on possible changes there. Fox News contributor Kevin Jackson and attorney Eric Guster join us in moments. But first, we go to correspondent Matt Finn with the latest live in Chicago. Matt?
Megyn, Donald Trump firing off another one of his signature direct attack tweets, this time at Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Trump tweeting out, quote, Chicago murder rate is record-setting, 4,331 shooting victims with 762 murders in 2016. If mayor can't do it, he must ask for federal help. Mayor Emanuel's spokesperson responding, saying in part, as the president-elect knows from his conversation with the mayor, we agree the federal government has a strong role to play in public safety. Now, to give you some perspective on Chicago's shocking crime stats, in 2016, 762 people were murdered, an average of 2 people killed per day. Imagine that in your hometown. Last year, there were over 4,000 people shot, and year to date, 4 people already murdered just 3 days in. Chicago's crime problem, very complex. Illegal guns, cheap heroin, gang turf wars, all topped off with a police force that's been essentially stripped of the tool of stop and frisk. Chicago top cop says it's time for prosecutors and judges to get tough.
If you do pick up a gun and you use it, you'll be held accountable. And right now, we don't do that.
Now, notable Chicago activist Father Michael Pfleger has helped lead the effort to stop violence where it happens most, in African-American communities where his parish is located. Pfleger says he's reached out to Trump so far but has not heard back. Pfleger agrees Chicago needs federal help.
Will they reach out and want to really see some substantive changes and making a difference, or do they just want to continue to Band-Aid?
Now, Megyn, we should point out CPD is under investigation by the Department of Justice for alleged misconduct and racism. And to be fair to Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who received so much criticism, he recently found the funding to add 1,000 more officers to the streets. Megyn?
Matt, thank you. Well, the former top cop in Chicago says he knows what's going on in his city. And in what he calls a disturbing case of irony, he says the deaths we're seeing are the byproduct of a group that claims to be trying to stop the violence. Black Lives Matter. Listen.
So what's happening is, and this is ironic, that a movement with the goal of saving black lives at this point is getting black lives taken, because 80% of our murder victims here in Chicago are male blacks. Less than half of 1% of all the shootings in this city involve police officers shooting civilians.
Joining me now, Kevin Jackson, Fox News contributor and executive director of theblacksphere.net, and Eric Guster, an attorney and political commentator. Great to see you. So, I mean, the numbers are just dreadful in Chicago, Kevin. Dreadful. And the murder surge that we've seen this year is the largest spike in 60 years in Chicago. So it's bad, and when you didn't think it could get worse, it just did. So what now happens? I mean, should we be sending the feds in to cities like Chicago? And what does that do to local policing?
Well, first of all, it's no surprise. I mean, we've had an administration that has been so bad against law enforcement, it's easy to see what the outcome was going to be. And the unfortunate part, Megyn, is it's obviously affecting the black community worse. As far as the feds go, I think what Trump did
just to pick up on that, just to clarify, is the suggestion that the police officers are holding back so that they don't get accused of excessive policing, excessive force?
Absolutely.
And that's leading to this.
Absolutely. Or absolutely. And not only that, they don't want to go in there to get in trouble, because what's going to happen is, as the top cop of Chicago said, they could end up getting in trouble and being accused of over policing.
That's what Director Comey
did is amazing. Yeah, well, what Trump did was amazing, because what he did in that one tweet was what he did for immigration, what he did for, saying we need to vet Muslims, is he brought a problem that has been cyclic. This isn't sneaking up on us, Megyn. We've known about this for years. Rahm Emanuel, week after week, the Chicago Tribune reports the deaths of these people every single weekend, and it's multiple people shot, multiple people killed. So it's not a surprise. And in fact, I suggest that Trump tweet Baltimore, and he tweet D.C., and he tweet Detroit as well, because
But where does this take us? I mean, you tell me, Eric, where this takes us, because what's he going to do? Send in the National Guard? I mean, I doubt Mayor Emanuel wants that. Is he going to send a bunch of federal money to Chicago? Because I don't know if the American taxpayers want that.
Of course, Trump is the master of tweeting something and has no meaning behind it. But 80% of arrests in Chicago are down. It's down 80%. And that is a major statistic that we have to pay attention to. When the cops stop working, which they claim that they have low morale, so they're not doing their jobs, that's a problem, Megyn.
Well, isn't that what the former superintendent of police is suggesting? That's what he seems to be blaming on Black Lives Matter.
No, the former police is using some George Wallace standing in schoolhouse door talking points. That's what he's doing. Because if police officers are afraid of being held accountable, that's a problem on them. Because Black Lives Matter and other social justice groups just want them to be held accountable to make sure they do the right thing.
But the accountability that we've seen in the Obama administration, Kevin, which include some 25 investigations by the DOJ. They're right now enforcing 19 agreements with law enforcement agencies. The Washington Post did a study on this and said these kinds of overhauls that come from these DOJ investigations have unintended consequences. One took 11 years and 8 police chiefs. One took $300 million of taxpayers' monies. So what is the likelihood that President Trump continues that? And should he, given the cost that we see?
Well, first of all, I want to address something that Eric said, which is around, what's happening in the black community. You're talking about people calling cops pigs in a blanket. Remember when I was up there and we did the show with you?
Stop telling that lie.
There was a girl.
It's not a lie. It did happen, but it's one tape. That's true.
Hey, Eric.
But the networks keep playing it over
I didn't interrupt you. Eric, I didn't interrupt you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I let you talk. I didn't let.
Go ahead.
So the point is, there was a girl in that audience that said they didn't even want police in black neighborhoods. So what do you want? Either you want cop presence, but here's the bigger issue. The bigger issue is we shouldn't be killing each other. We should be a civil society that doesn't go around killing people to the tune of 762 people.
Getting to the root cause of that is a much
That's exactly right.
bigger effort. I'll give you the last word, Eric. Give you the last word.
It takes a community policing. It takes communities working with police officers, and cops just need to do their job.
Now we have
Black Lives Matter and other groups just want them to do their job and be fair. That's all we're asking. Be fair and civil to all people, regardless of race and economic conditions.
All right, guys, got to leave it at that. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Coming up, after her New Year's Eve performance, and she lashed out at the executives at ABC. Did you hear about this? And Dick Clark Productions? right? Were you? I mean, I don't know if you're watching. I was watching Kimberly and Eric. But the question is whether Mariah Carey could be facing a defamation lawsuit. OMG. Oh, secondhand embarrassment. Developing tonight, new questions about the legal implications, I say, of Mariah Carey's reaction to her New Year's Eve performance. The singer's botched performance on New Year's Eve becoming a viral sensation, but the drama did not stop when the show ended. In moments, we'll be joined by attorneys Mark Eiglarsh and Andel Brown on the potential legal fallout. But first, we check in with Trace Gallagher, who volunteered to be on this story all day long. Go ahead, TG.
I did, Megyn. Mariah Carey's team says she was singing to track, meaning parts of her performance are lip-synced and other parts she sings live. Either way, her manager says Carey needs to be able to hear the music, and she couldn't because her earpieces did not work. But production sources told Entertainment Weekly that part of the problem was that Carey skipped rehearsal. Carey's people deny that, saying she had a stand-in dancer, but she did the sound check and complained the audio was coming in choppy. Carey's manager says the production company assured the singer that everything would work once they went live. It didn't. Watch. Got a little off. Mariah Carey walked off stage and shortly after tweeted, quote, "Blank happens. Have a happy and healthy new year, everybody. Here's to making more headlines in 2017. But when the disastrous performance also aired 3 hours later on the West Coast feed, Carey's team accused Dick Clark Productions of sabotaging the performance to improve ratings. The production company responded, quote, "To suggest that Dick Clark Productions would ever intentionally compromise the success of any artist is defamatory, outrageous, and frankly absurd." But today, Mariah Carey told Entertainment Weekly that Dick Clark was an incredible person and, quote, "I'm of the opinion that Dick Clark would not have let an artist go through that, and he would have been as mortified as I was in real time." By the way, Jenny McCarthy, who co-hosted the show, said if the background dancers were in sync, which they were, and could hear the music blaring from the speakers, why couldn't Mariah Carey?
Oh,
Megyn.
She raises a good point. I hadn't considered that myself. Good to see you, Trace. Joining us now with more, Mark Eiglarsh, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and Andel Brown, a defense attorney, on this important matter. Thank you for being here, counselors. Mark Eiglarsh, let's start with whether the Dick Clark production company can sue Mariah Carey for what it is alleging were her representatives' defamatory statements about them setting her up to fail.
Absolutely not. They would have to prove actual malice because we're dealing with public figures. It's a very high burden. That means they have to prove that at the time she made the statements, she knew they were false or a reckless disregard of the truth. Megyn, as we sit here today, she still believes that they sabotaged her. They have no case.
Well, she doesn't, though, Andel, because it wasn't Mariah who said that. It was her rep who apparently said something off the record to somebody, and it may or may not have been that they set her up intentionally, but that they didn't set her up to succeed in any event. Your thoughts?
Setting her up to fail is very strong words. Could they bring a lawsuit? Absolutely. Will they bring a lawsuit? I don't think so. I don't think it makes sense for them to do that. That would be kicking an artist when they're down.
They're using a strong word. Defamatory is strong. I mean, I was surprised to see that in the Dick Clark statement.
Setting someone up to fail is very strong as well. I think we all saw Mariah Carey's performance break down and keep steadily breaking on down in front of our eyes on New Year's Eve. Her team, they're doing damage control and they're trying to pass the buck. Nobody's buying it. Dick Clark's and his company's reputation is intact, and that's the problem they're going to have. So here's
the question: Can she sue them? Can she sue them, Mark Eiglarsh, for saying you did set me up to fail? You caused a public embarrassment. But then there is the question of why the backup singers could hear the music and Mariah could not.
Yeah, listen. Anyone could sue anyone for anything. We've learned that. My analysis is the same if we flip it and we make her the plaintiff. She's a public figure. They're public figures.
But she wouldn't be suing for defamation.
It's not going to go anywhere.
They publicly
Megyn,
humiliated her.
Megyn, hold on. There's something wrong with my earpiece. I can't hear. Perhaps, Megyn, we should let the audience finish this analysis.
I love it when he brings the props. I will say this, Andel. I have anchored in Times Square on New Year's Eve, with Hemmer in the wee hours of the night, and it's really loud. And I too have had choppy audio. I can relate to her.
These things happen. She's a great artist. She's had a great career. She just had a bad night, and I'm sure she'd give her all to have that performance back.
I think it would have been
There's
more
no damages.
embarrassing if she had been caught lip syncing, but she wasn't. She was trying to sing it live. It was like clearly, just parts were on the track. But the reason there were long bouts of silence is because she couldn't hear. But I think it's worse when they get caught lip syncing. That's what I thought happened. Not
I agree,
exactly right.
Megyn. Here's the problem. There's no damages here on either side. They're all going to watch the show next year,
That's
and she's
true.
going to
But they
continue to have a very
shouldn't
successful
use
career.
the scary legal words because you wind up in Kelly's court.
Agreed.
Bye.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Don't go away.